There's a specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from never once asking what you want. It's a Sunday afternoon. The light in the apartment is the particular gold that happens in late October, when the sun drops fast and everything it touches looks like it matters. A man is sitting on his couch. He has nowhere to be. He was looking forward to this, though he couldn't have told you what this was exactly. Just the word Sunday, just the idea of a day that belonged to him. His phone is face up on the cushion beside him. It vibrates. He looks. A friend needs advice about a contract dispute. He types a reply. The phone vibrates again before he's finished. His sister, asking him to call their mother because she's been saying something worrying and he always knows what to say. He finishes the first message, starts a second. A third vibration. A colleague whose presentation is tomorrow and who can't make the data visualizations work. A fourth. Someone he barely knows from a networking event 2 years ago, asking if he'd be willing to meet for coffee and pick his brain. He answers all four. Not because he wants to. Because he doesn't know what happens if he doesn't. Not the social consequence, he's never actually tested that. Something else. Something more private, that sits lower in the chest than social consequence. The light in the apartment changes while he types. It was gold. Now it's gray. He doesn't notice because he isn't looking at the light. He is looking at what someone else needs from him. By 6 o'clock he is tired in a way that has nothing to do with effort. He made no decision today. He traveled nowhere. He lifted nothing heavier than his phone. And yet there is a specific depletion in him, the kind that isn't from spending energy but from never once having been asked what he wants to do with it. He puts the phone down. The apartment is quiet. He doesn't know what to do with the quiet, because the quiet has no one in it who needs anything from him, and he has spent so long organizing himself around need that without it, he cannot locate himself at all. This is not burnout. This is the particular loneliness of someone who has never been absent long enough to be missed as a person. There is a pattern that is almost invisible because it wears the clothes of virtue. It presents as generosity. It looks like reliability. From the outside, and often from inside too, it resembles love. You are the person people call. You are the one who always shows up, always knows what to say, always has bandwidth when everyone else is at capacity. You answer the messages. You take the calls. You stay late, stay available, stay ready. And people are genuinely grateful, which confirms the story. I am someone who gives. I am someone who matters. I am someone who is needed. But there is a question hiding beneath that story that you have never let yourself finish asking. Not, am I needed? You already know the answer. The question that lives underneath, that surfaces only in moments of exhaustion or in the particular silence of a Sunday when you thought you might finally rest. The question is, would any of these people notice if the person who showed up were a stranger? Would they notice, or would they simply be relieved that someone picked up the phone? The exhaustion is real. But it is not the exhaustion of overextension. You have been overextended before and it felt different. It felt purposeful, like running past your limit toward something that mattered. This is different. This is the exhaustion of a person who has been so thoroughly organized around other people's need that they have lost track of whether they have any of their own. It is not that you have given too much. It is that you have given without ever knowing what the alternative was. Without ever asking what you would do with the hour, the afternoon, the life if no one needed anything from you. The people who are most indispensable to others are often the most invisible to themselves. And the cruelest part of this particular trap is the guilt. Not the guilt that comes when you've done something genuinely harmful. The guilt that surfaces when you don't answer immediately. When you let a message sit. When you decline something. A small, specific unease. Not quite shame, not quite fear, but somewhere between them, as if your not being available were a moral failure. As if your absence were a wound you had inflicted. The guilt is disproportionate to the act, and you know it's disproportionate, and still it moves you. You answer anyway. Because the alternative, sitting in the quiet of an unanswered phone, feels like something you're not sure you know how to survive. What you haven't yet examined is where that guilt came from. How old it is. What it was doing before phones existed. There is a word in Carl Jung's work that psychologists use correctly and most people misunderstand completely. The word is persona. In common usage it sounds like performance, a false face, an act. But Jung meant something more precise and more disturbing than that. He was describing a psychological structure, not a moral failure. He was describing the mechanism by which a person adapts to the world. Every person develops a persona, Jung argued. It is not optional and it is not pathological. It is the face you present to the social world, the version of yourself organized around what the collective expects and rewards. The child who learns that being quiet keeps the peace develops a quiet persona. The child who learns that anticipating need earns warmth develops a helpful persona. The teenager who learns that having answers earns respect develops a knowledgeable persona. None of this is chosen consciously. It is learned the way a body learns to walk, through repeated feedback, through what worked and what didn't, through the slow discovery of what the world around you rewards. The persona is not the problem. The problem comes when it stops being a tool and begins to be an identity. When the face you present to the world is no longer something you put on and take off, but something you have been wearing so long, in so many contexts, that you have forgotten there is a face underneath. Jung wrote, in 2 essays on analytical psychology, that the persona is a semblance, a two-dimensional reality. What he meant by two-dimensional is important. The persona can only be seen from the outside. It has depth on one axis, it is convincingly real to others. But it has no depth on the second axis. It does not contain the interiority that constitutes a person. It contains only what the world can see. The translation into lived terms is this: when your persona is built around availability, around being the person who shows up, who responds, who makes things work, then the entire structure of your social identity is organized around what you do for others. And doing for others feels like existing. The feedback is constant and confirming. People are grateful. People depend on you. People say your name with relief. Each of those moments is a small confirmation that you are here, that you matter, that your presence has meaning. What the persona cannot give you, and what you have perhaps stopped expecting, is the experience of maturing when you are not performing a function. Thomas understood this economy before he had language for it. He was 10 years old and his parents' marriage was beginning to fail in the quiet way marriages fail before anyone admits they are failing, through a series of absences, through a change in the emotional weather of the house that no one explained. Thomas was the older child by 4 years. He began without deciding to become useful. He made dinner on the nights his mother couldn't. He helped his sister with homework. He became the one who asked the right question at the right moment, who diffused the tension at the table, who stayed up and kept his father company when his father couldn't sleep. None of this was asked of him. That is important. He chose it in the way a child chooses things, not consciously but in response to what felt safest, to what made the air in the house change from heavy to lighter. What he learned was a lesson that felt true for the rest of his life, that being needed was the safest form of belonging. Not loved, specifically. Love was uncertain, love could be withdrawn, love depended on being a particular kind of person and he wasn't always sure what kind of person that was. But needed was reliable. If you were needed, you were not in danger of disappearing. If you were needed, the people around you had a structural reason to keep you present. The belonging was guaranteed by the function. By his late 30s, Thomas had built an entire professional and personal life on the architecture of that 10-year-old's discovery. He was the person his friends called before making any major decision. He was the one at work who stayed when the project was failing. He was the one his family looked to in every crisis, who could be counted on to be steady when everyone else was frightened. He was, by any external measure, a person of exceptional reliability and generosity. And he was, on the Sunday afternoons when no one needed anything and the apartment was quiet, a person who did not know who he was. This is what Jung called the danger of identification with the persona. Not that the person is performing, but that the performance has consumed the performer. That the role has absorbed the one who plays it. Jung went further than the mask metaphor though. He recognized that the persona doesn't simply replace the self, it also suppresses it. Everything in you that does not fit the role, the anger, the longing, the preferences, the particular desires that have nothing to do with being useful, gets pushed into what he called the shadow. Not destroyed. But it accumulates there, in the dark, becoming more charged with time, occasionally surfacing in ways that seem irrational and disproportionate because they have been held back for so long. The Sunday afternoon restlessness that Thomas could not account for. The particular bitterness that rose in him sometimes when someone asked for something he had already given too many times. These were not character flaws. They were the accumulated pressure of everything that had been put aside in order to remain useful. Here is what no one tells you and what you may not want to hear. The guilt you feel when you don't respond, that small, specific pressure in the chest when you leave a message unanswered, that guilt is not evidence of your compassion. It is evidence of your conditioning. Somewhere, very early, you learned that your not being available was dangerous. Not inconvenient to others. Dangerous. You learned this not because it was true, but because in the specific emotional environment you grew up inside, something that felt like danger followed your withdrawal. Maybe the danger was disappointment, a parent's face that changed when you didn't perform correctly. Maybe it was conflict, a household where your being difficult created consequences you were too young to manage. Maybe it was something as quiet as simply noticing that being helpful made people warm and being anything else made them distant. Children read these signals with extraordinary precision. They learn the lesson completely and they carry it forward as truth. The truth is, you are responding now to a threat that does not exist in its original form. The people messaging you on a Sunday afternoon are not going to withdraw belonging if you don't answer. They are adults with resources. They will find another way. The cost of your non-response to them is mild inconvenience. The cost of your non-response to yourself, over years, over decades, is that you have never actually lived a day that was yours. You have lived a series of days organized around other people's urgency. You did not become someone who gives. You became someone who cannot receive because receiving requires having a self that can hold something. Eric, from writing about love in ways that apply far beyond romantic relationship, made a distinction that is almost impossible to hear the first time without resistance. He argued that what we call generosity, what we call giving, can be two entirely different things wearing the same name. There is giving that flows from a fullness, from a person who has a self, who knows what they feel, who has made contact with what they want, and who chooses from that fullness to offer something to another. And there is giving that flows from an absence, from a person who has not made contact with their own interiority, who does not know what they want, who uses the act of giving as a substitute for the self they have not yet located. From called the second form not generosity but escape. What looks like love of others is, in this reading, a flight from the self, a way of remaining busy enough, needed enough, engaged enough, that the question of who you are underneath the function never gets the silence it would require to be answered. What From was pointing to here is not a moral accusation. He was not saying you are selfish or fraudulent. He was saying that mature giving, the kind that actually reaches another person, that creates genuine contact, requires a self to give from. And if you have spent 20 or 30 years organizing your entire identity around being needed, the question of what you want, who you are when you are not useful, what you would do with a free hour if no one needed anything, these questions may feel not just unfamiliar but actively threatening. Because if you stop being available and there is nothing underneath the availability, then what is left? That question sits in you now like something you already know the answer to and cannot yet afford to say out loud. Open your eyes for a moment on what is actually happening when Thomas doesn't answer a message. Nothing happens. The world continues. The colleague finds the data visualization without him. The friend resolves the contract dispute by calling someone else. The Sunday light moves from gold to gray whether his phone is on or off, whether he is present to it or not. The absence he fears, the one that feels like disappearing, like betrayal, like proof of something unfixable in him, does not occur. What occurs is simply this: an hour, an afternoon, a day in which his attention was not consumed by someone else's need, a day in which, for the first time in longer than he can calculate, nothing was asked of him. And in that space, the space he has spent years filling before it could become too quiet, something moves. Not loudly, not dramatically. Something that has been waiting underneath the function, underneath the persona, underneath the 30 years of learned necessity. It is unfamiliar enough to be alarming. It might be curiosity. It might be desire. It might be the first tentative signal from the person he was before he learned that being needed was the safest way to be. He doesn't know what to do with it, but it is there. And its being there is the thing that, if he lets it, changes everything. Your availability was never generosity. It was the shape your disappearance took. This is the layer that Movement 4 did not reach. Because the twist, the recognition that your giving has been an escape from selfhood, is still framed in terms of what you have been doing to yourself. It identifies the wound, but it doesn't yet name what the wound was protecting. And beneath every wound there is something being protected. Jung's concept of individuation goes further than the diagnosis of the persona. It describes a process, Not a decision, not a single recognition, but a long, uncomfortable, non-linear process by which a person begins to separate from the collective identity they have absorbed and to locate, underneath it, the particular shape of who they actually are. This is not the same as selfishness. This is not withdrawal in order to have more for yourself. Individuation is the process of becoming specific. Of becoming, for the first time, a person who exists in a form distinct enough that others can actually encounter them, rather than only using them. The persona of perpetual availability does not permit encounter. It permits transaction. When you are always available, always functional, always ready to serve whatever need presents itself, you have become, in a psychological sense, frictionless. And frictionless surfaces cannot be held. You can be used by them, you can slide across them, but you cannot grip them, cannot meet them, cannot press your weight against them and feel something press back. The people who seem to need you most have, in a precise sense, never met you. They have met your function. They have met the face you present. They have encountered the efficiency of your availability. But the person underneath, the one who has preferences, who has limits, who has particular desires that have nothing to do with your usefulness, that person has been, for most of your life, absent from the room. Individuation begins, Jung wrote in Psychological Types, with a gradual dissolution of the persona, not a violent removal, not a dramatic break, but a slow process of becoming less organized around the collective expectation and more organized around the particular signal of one's own interior life. This is a different kind of courage than the courage of staying late, of always showing up, of never letting anyone down. It is the courage of becoming unavailable to the version of yourself that other people have constructed and require you to maintain. It is the courage of the unanswered Sunday message. Not as statement. Not as revenge. But as the first practice of the only question that matters. What is here, in this moment, in this person that belongs entirely to no one else? And here is the thing that is difficult to sit with. The life that was waiting for you while you were always available, it has not expired. It is not a missed opportunity. It is not something that closes. It is the particular life that is available only to a person who has stopped filling every silence with a function, who has let the quiet become long enough to hear something move inside it. That life is not dramatic. It does not begin with a revelation. It begins with a Sunday afternoon when your phone vibrates and you choose, not grandly, not as a declaration, but simply, to look at the light in the room instead. You are not being asked to become unavailable. You are not being asked to refuse your relationships, to abandon the people who have come to rely on you, to reinvent yourself as someone who doesn't care. That would simply be another persona, the opposite shape of the same escape. What is being asked? What becomes possible when you begin to understand the psychology that has organized your life around need, is something much quieter and much harder than withdrawal. It is presence. Real presence. The kind that is only possible when the person showing up is actually there, not performing availability, not managing other people's experience of them, but actually, fully, specifically there. The kind of presence that has weight and texture, that has preferences and limits, that can be felt rather than simply used. When Thomas began, slowly and without drama, to leave some messages unanswered, to let Sunday be Sunday, to sit with the discomfort of the quiet rather than filling it immediately, something changed in the texture of his relationships. Not immediately. Not without friction. But over time, the people who stayed, who continued to want to be near him, began to encounter something they hadn't encountered before. They began to encounter him. A person who occasionally said he didn't want to. A person whose yes meant something because his no was real. A person who, when he was present, was actually there, not managing, not serving, not performing reliability, but there, with his own particular weight, his own particular way of seeing things, his own particular attention that was his and could be given rather than simply extracted. The strange reversal at the heart of all this. You thought your availability was what made you valuable. You thought that the service was the substance of the relationship. And in some cases, in the transactional ones, in the ones that were always about the function, you were right. Those relationships did not survive the withdrawal, or they changed into something thinner and more honest. But in the relationships that mattered, in the ones where something real was possible, your withdrawal was not the end of the connection. It was the beginning of it. You were not building relationships with your availability. You were building a waiting room where no one ever got to meet you. There is a different kind of belonging than the kind you have known, the belonging that is guaranteed by function, that is earned through utility, that is secured by never being absent long enough to be missed as a person rather than a service. The different kind is not guaranteed. It does not come with the safety of necessity. It cannot be maintained through effort alone. It requires something more frightening, being present as a person, specific, limited, particular, imperfect, occasionally unavailable, and trusting that this is enough. That you are enough. Not because of what you do. Because of what you are. The silence that comes when you stop being always available is not emptiness. It is not the sound of relationships ending or of your value being revealed as nothing. It is the first sound of a different kind of life. One in which you are not distributed across everyone else's needs, but concentrated, gathered into the particular shape of who you are, available to be encountered rather than simply used. It is, in a very precise sense, the sound of your life beginning. Not beginning again. Beginning, as if for the first time, because in all the important ways, it is. You are always here. Underneath the function, underneath the persona, underneath the years of organized helpfulness and the guilt that kept it in place, you were always here. The only question was whether you would ever let the room get quiet enough to notice. The life that was waiting while you were always available is not somewhere else. It is the life that begins the moment you stop confusing your presence with your usefulness. It is the life in which you discover that the most precise expression of who you are is not what you do for others. It is simply that you exist, fully, particularly, irreducibly, and that this, without condition, is enough. If something in this video landed somewhere true in you, the next conversation on this channel goes further, into the psychology of why we lose the ability to desire for ourselves, and what it takes to recover it. The people who find their way back to themselves tend to come here more than once. If that's you, you're already in the right place.